All right, let's talk about understanding. I mean, really understanding something. Because it turns out, the way most of us think about it, it's kind of wrong. And getting this right, well, it can totally change how you learn forever. You know the feeling, right? You're sitting in a meeting, or maybe a lecture, and the presenter is just crystal clear. Everything clicks. You're nodding along thinking, yep, got it, makes perfect sense. And then, an hour later, you try to explain it to a coworker, and poof, it's just gone. That feeling, that ghost of an idea, that's exactly what we're going to unpack today. So where does that feeling come from? Well, it all starts with something we can call the explanation illusion. This is this really powerful but totally misleading idea that if someone explains something well, then understanding just gets, downloaded from their brain into yours. Yeah, we tend to see understanding as a passive thing, something you get, you receive. An expert explains and we just listen. An author writes and we just read. We think learning is basically a communication problem. If the signal is clear enough, we'll get the message. It feels so intuitive, but this is exactly where we get tripped up. Okay, so look at this contrast because this is huge. On one hand, you have that simple explanation model. Someone talks, you receive. But the deeper reality, it's so much more active. Your brain has to actually construct the idea for itself. Understanding isn't received from the outside, it's built piece by piece on the inside. So learning isn't a communication problem, it's a structural one. So if that model is totally wrong, why does a smooth explanation feel so right? Why are we so easily seduced by that feeling of clarity? Well, it turns out there are some pretty powerful psychological tricks our own minds play on us. Let's break it down. First up, you've got smoothness. When an explanation flows perfectly, there's no friction, and our brain mistakes that easy ride for actual progress. Then there's familiarity. We hear a bunch of terms we recognize, and that cozy feeling of recognition feels like real mastery. Spoiler, it's not. Third, there's the relief of closure. Ah, I get it now. That feeling of resolving uncertainty is great, but we mistake it for depth. And finally, and this is a big one, we're borrowing someone else's structure. Their neat, organized thoughts feel like our own for a minute, but it's a rental. And as soon as the presentation is over, you have to give it back. This quote just nails it, doesn't it? The absence of confusion is interpreted as the presence of understanding. We think, hey, I'm not confused, so I must get it. But really, all that's happened is that a slick explanation has paved over all the tricky parts, all the gaps, so our brain doesn't even get a chance to struggle and actually learn. And this is where it all falls apart. That illusion of understanding, it doesn't shatter while you're listening to the expert. Oh no, it shatters later. The moment you actually try to use that knowledge, that's the real test. So where exactly does it fail? Well, remember that meeting? Suddenly you find you can't apply that big idea to a slightly different problem. That clear explanation, it didn't solve your confusion, it just hid the gaps, postponing it for later. And before you know it, the whole thing just fades away, leaving you with a couple of buzzwords, but none of the actual logic. And here's the real kicker. When this happens, we don't question our method. We don't think, maybe just listening isn't enough. No, we blame ourselves. We think, man, I must have a terrible memory, or I guess I just didn't pay enough attention. We misdiagnose the problem entirely and go looking for another, even clearer explanation, just spinning our wheels in the same cycle. Okay, enough about the problem. Let's build a better model. This requires a pretty fundamental shift in how we think. Understanding isn't something you get. It's something your brain builds. It's an active and sometimes messy construction project. So, what does this shift actually feel like? Well, as real understanding starts to form, your brain starts prioritizing connections between ideas, not just isolated facts. It starts to compress big ideas through smart organization, not just by leaving stuff out. You actually start forming expectations, so when something surprising happens, it's a huge learning moment. But the biggest change is this. Retrieval becomes generative. You're not just repeating what you heard. You're able to reconstruct the idea from the ground up. This slide really gets to the core of it. This is the difference between parroting something back and truly knowing it. Reproductive recall, just repeating words, is incredibly fragile. It disappears fast. But generative reasoning, that's durable. It's the ability to reconstruct what has to be true based on the principles you've built. It allows you to fill in the gaps all on your own. So all of this leads us to a really cool, new way to think about knowledge. A new mental model. Understanding isn't about collecting a pile of facts. It's about building a specific shape inside your mind.
and we can give that shape a name: internal constraint. Now, that sounds a little technical, but all it means is that the mental structure you've built starts to guide your thinking from the inside. You can start to rule out bad ideas on your own because they just don't fit the shape. They don't make sense. And you don't need anyone to tell you that. And I think the absolute best way to picture this whole idea is with a powerful analogy. An explanation, it provides a path. But real understanding, it builds the terrain. Think about it. Following a path is easy. You just follow the instructions. But you don't really know the land. And if the path disappears, you're lost. Building the terrain is way harder. It takes effort. But once you have that internal map, you can create your own paths. You can navigate anywhere you want. It's durable. It's flexible. That's real understanding. So what does this all mean for you? How can you use this? Well, it means a whole new approach to learning. From now on, when you feel confused, don't see it as failure. See it as your mind doing the hard work of building that terrain. Instead of asking, was that explained clearly? Ask yourself, have I given my brain the chance to actually build the structure? Always remember, understanding isn't delivered, it is built. The goal isn't just a pile of knowledge, it's a well-formed mental shape. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. What if the real goal of learning isn't just about finding the right answer? What if it's about building the kind of mental structure that makes the right answer feel, well, completely obvious?